Guys, this morning, and as Pastor Keith come to me and offered his pulpit, and I want to say how much of a privilege it is. I know I don't get to speak too often. I began to pray and really begin to seek and really begin to just to see what God has for this morning. I want you to know that I don't take this lightly. I want you to know that it is a privilege. I know I get to speak on Wednesday nights to your students every week, week in and week out, but it is an honor to be behind the pulpit this morning. So I want you to know that it's not about me. I want you to know it's not about it's about God, and I want you to know that I put Him first. This morning, and as I was kind of back and forth between two different topics or two different things that really God had just laid on my heart, but really I feel confident in this one this morning. This morning I'm going to ask, and is everybody awake? Is everybody awake? Everybody good? I'm a youth pastor, by the way, so I'm just going to tell you that. I'm just going to put that out there. I'm a youth pastor. Y'all know that. I'm a youth pastor, so I may do things a little bit different. But I want to tell you this morning, I'm going to have some crowd participation, so I'm going to need your help, okay? When I ask you to say a word, I need you to repeat it back to me, and not half of you. I want everybody to do that, okay? So I'm going to need some crowd participation. I'm going to wake you up, and I want you to know that you're listening, okay? This morning I want to start, and I'm just going to start out with my text. This morning is out of Luke, and I'm going to read, and I love reading different versions of the Bible. I love reading the NIV, the New Living. I love reading the Message. I love reading different ones, but this morning I'm going to come out of the New King James. I want to come out of the New King James, so I'm going to read about 11 verses here this morning. Y'all bear with me because I'm not the best reader. I'm going to read it pretty slow, but when I ask you to repeat, y'all repeat, okay? Y'all know that. That's kind of elementary, so y'all just listen up, okay? But this morning out of Luke, I'm going to read out of Luke chapter 5. I'm going to read verses 1 through 11, okay? So it was, as the multitude pressed about him to hear the word of God, that he stood by the lake of Gennesaret, and he saw two boats standing by the lake. And the fishermen have gone from them, and they were washing their nets. Can everybody say nets? Yes. Can everybody say nets? Yes. Then he got into the boat, which was Simon's, and he asked him to pull out a little bit from the land. And then he sat down and taught the multitude from the boat. And then when he had stopped speaking, he looked at Simon and said, "Launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." Can everybody say nets? Yes. But Simon answered and said to him, "Master, I have toiled and I have worked all night and caught nothing. Nevertheless, at your word, I will let down the net." Can everybody say net? Yes. And when they had done this, they had caught a great number of fish, and their net, can everybody say net, was breaking. So they signaled to their partners in the other boat to come out and help them. And then they came and filled both boats, so that they began to sink. And when Simon Peter saw this, he fell down at Jesus' knees and said, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish which they had taken. And so also was James and John, the sons of Zebedee, were there partnering with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, "Do not fear, for from now on you will catch men." So when they brought their boats to land, they forsook all. Can everybody say all? And followed him. This morning you're going to hear me say this a lot, and most of you guys know I am an Auburn fan, and I'm not going to be talking about football this morning, but Auburn in 2010 made this slogan very popular. And you're going to hear me say this a lot this morning. All in. Can everybody say all in? All in. You're going to hear me say that repeatedly time and time again. But this morning I want to challenge some and just challenge you and ask you, are you all in this morning? This morning I want to talk about some superheroes. I love superheroes. Right now you've got a couple of movies out. You've got Iron Man 3, and then you've also got the Man of Steel, the Superman. How many of them here loves those superheroes? Y'all can raise your hand. It's okay. Crowd participation. Thank you very much. We have some hero fans in the place. I love superheroes. And I have one guy that we're going to bring up. I think his name, and he's got a movie out right now. It's Superman. How many of us in here are Superman fans? We got a few? We got a few. It's okay to raise your hand in church. It's okay, I promise. Superman, that's a good-looking guy, isn't he? He got the little comb over going on. He's a sharp guy. He is a sharp guy. He's all business, but when it comes to it, he's ready to save the day. I think Superman's Brooke's probably her favorite. She used to love to watch that show Smallville with Superman. Clark Kent loves all that. But my favorite is this next guy, the Man in Black. Batman. How many of us here are Batman fans? Thank you. Batman. I love Batman because this guy has no super talents other than just knowing all this taekwondo and karate and all this stuff. He's got a cool car and a cool butler. But this guy is like amazing. This guy is amazing. Flying from buildings and this and that. And it's not some superpower. It's just all of his gadgets. I love gadgets. How many of us in here, there's another one of those superheroes that's in the top 3. He deals a lot with webs. What's his name? There we go. How many of us in here are Spider-Man fans? We love Spider-Man. There we go. Swinging around and all that, man. I love all these guys, but I have to say Batman is my favorite. Batman has to be my favorite. This morning, I want you to know that God is looking for some heroes in this generation to save this generation. I want you to know that this morning. Every one of these guys, we know that the world has brought these guys and made them these fictional characters, but they have amazing talents, they have amazing abilities, and they've captured us from little kids. And every one of these, all these 3 guys that I've just mentioned are not some people that have come on the scene in the last 10 years. They've been around forever. I remember my dad talking about Spider-Man and Superman and Batman and all that, watching the old Batman cartoons, Batman and Robin. I love those. So these aren't guys that have just come on the scene in the last 10 years. But I want you to know that these guys were devoted. These heroes, they were devoted to the task at hand. I remember, it just reminds me in the Spider-Man movies, where at one point in some of the recent ones that have come out, I think it was in part 2, maybe part 3, where he just gave his suit up because he was being pulled between 2 worlds. He was being pulled between the normalcy and being the superhero, the one that saves the day. And at the end of the movie, or towards the end of the movie, he chooses that because he knows that he has to be all in. He can't be Spider-Man at one moment and be over here with MJ at the next. He knows that he had to be all in. Clark Kent knew that he had to keep his ability secret, because there'll be others that would try to tear him down and try to disprove him, but that man was all in. Batman was a mysterious guy. He was one of those guys that he was a very business, suit and tie kind of guy, walked around. Nobody knew who he was, but he was all business. He was all in. This morning, like I said, you're going to hear me say that 1,000,002 times. But this morning, God's given me a word to challenge you and ask you, and are you going to be all in? Are we going to choose to be halfway, or are we going to choose to be all the way in? Are we going to choose to be all the way in? A lot of times, and it's not speaking in general, it's speaking in general, not specific, but a lot of times Christians, when they decide that, you know what, I'm going to come to an altar, or I'm going to find that place and I'm going to ask God into my life, they decide that they're going to get in their box of Christianity and just sit there and wait. And that's not who God called us to be. God didn't call us to get in a box. God didn't say sit in a chair and stay there until I come. He didn't say that. He didn't say get inside of this big box that we call a building and stay there until I come. When I think about a box, all I think about is one thing. Things that go inside of a box, they're dead. They're dead. But this morning, I want you to know that, you know what, if you've asked Jesus into your life, He brought life. Is that what the Word says? You can shake your head like this, or you can do this. You just tell me, well, it's okay. I need participation. I need feedback. His Word says that whenever we ask Him into our life, He speaks life. He brings life. We must die to ourselves, but He brings us back up. He resurrects something amazing, and we die to our old self, and the new self comes alive. So that we shouldn't be inside of some box. We're not dead people, we're alive. We're alive. And so this morning, in order to do that, we have to be all in. If we're going to be alive and we're going to be doing God's will, we've got to be all in. We've got to be all in. And you say this morning, well, how do I become a hero? How do I become a hero? I'm not asking you to become Batman. I'm not asking you to become Superman. And I want to tell you guys, one of my favorite heroes, and I'm just going to slid this out here, and some of y'all may know them or not. Y'all remember the Ninja Turtles? Those guys were amazing when I was a kid, and I loved them. I loved them. The guy with the nunchucks, Michelangelo, was my guy. That was my dude. And plus the orange, Auburn, that just kind of, it was just a weird coincidence. But that was my guy, man. He was amazing. But this morning, I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you to be the hero that God has called you to be. And you ask yourself this morning, well, how do I do that? You've got to be all in. You've got to make a choice to be all in. This morning, you've got to be willing to drop everything and follow Him. Just like the Scripture says, it said that Peter, when he saw all of that fish coming into his net, and he began to just be overwhelmed, and the boats began to sink, they were like, you know what? I'm following this guy. I'm all in. I'm leaving everything behind, and I'm following you, Jesus. This morning, when's the last time that was a slogan in your life? When was the last time that was something that come across? You know what? I'm not worried about any of this. God, I'm not worried about the world. I'm not worried about what the world thinks I should be or what the world thinks I can be. But God, I want what you want, and I'm following you. I'm following you this morning. Are we awake? Are we awake this morning? I just want to make sure. Can everybody say nets? There we go. All right, we good. I believe that EAG is a church that's all in. I believe that we are a church chasing after God's will. I believe that we are a church fishing for men. I believe that. I believe that we are a church moving forward, not staying complacent in our little mud and our pity party. I believe we're moving forward. I believe that in my heart. This morning, I believe also that there's some young men in this place. I believe that there's some young men in this place that says, I'm all in. I believe there's some men in this place that says, I'm all in. I'm a prayer. I'm all in. I'm a man of praise. I'm a man of the Word. I'm a man of fasting. I'm all in. I believe there's some women in this place. I believe there's some young ladies in this place that's not out looking for a guy. Students, college students, and some of you single folk, I'm talking to you. I believe there's some young ladies in this place that ain't out looking for the next guy that walks by, that you're following after the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And if some guy comes your way, you ain't worried about him. He better be a man of praise. He better be a man of God, or you ain't going to give him a time of day. I believe that there's some women in this place this morning. I believe that. I believe there's some students in this place that aren't going to sit on their butt during the summer and go to the pool and hang out. But I believe there's some students in this place that say, I'm not going to be average. I'm going to be different. I'm all in. I believe that this morning. I believe there's some families in this place that said, devil, take your swing at me. Give me your best shot. You may take a swing at my finances. You may take a swing at my family. You may take a swing at my job. But we're all in this morning. We're all in this morning. I believe that this morning. I believe that there's some folks in here that have that foundation in God and say, you know what? I'm all in. I'm all in. How many of us this place, can we say all in? Say, I'm all in. That sounded good. That sounded good. I want you to know in this book, there's a lot of heroes. There's a lot of heroes, but they got one thing in common. There's one thing they've got in common. And it's not their name. It's not their race. It's not the color of their skin. It's not who their mom and dad were or the place that they were born in or what the word they spoke, but it's because they were all in. They made a choice to be all in. And I'm asking you this morning, are you making a choice to be all in? Are you making a choice and make a decision that, you know what, I don't care what this world brings me, God, I'm following you. I'm going to let my nets down and I'm going to leave them behind, everything that I know, and I'm going to follow you this morning. I want to challenge you. Some of you may be going through something in your life. You may be in the best time of your life, or you may be at the lowest point in your life. But I want to challenge you this morning to follow Him, to say, I'm all in. I can promise you, these superheroes, y'all have seen the movies. You've seen what Hollywood has partaken of these movies. You've seen that there has been low points in their life, but they came out on top. I want you to know something. There's a superhero that I call Jesus that says in the end that we win. That we win. I want you to know that this morning. I want you to know that. And I want you to know that these things that every one of these men had in common, they were all in. You know what I can see? I can just imagine. I love when God gives me pictures in my head. I love that. I love playing out. That doesn't happen very often, okay? That does not happen, okay? But when God begins to play things out, you can ask Brooke, I'm like a kid, I'm like, oh my God, let me tell you what just happened. But I want to tell you this morning, I can imagine when Moses was standing there and God says, you know what, grab the tail of that viper. Grab the tail of that viper and I promise you I'll take control and and you know what? Y'all know a viper can kill you. Do y'all know that? Them things I am not. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to have to say, God, are you sure you talking to me if He asked me to grab a snake? I don't care if it's a viper. I don't care if it's a chicken snake. I'm going to run like a chicken the other way. I'm just going to tell you, snakes are not my thing, okay? But I can imagine Moses standing there and God says, trust me, grab the tip of that snake, grab his tail, and I'll control it. I can imagine at that moment, heaven cheered and said, you know what, check Moses, he's all in. He's all in. I can imagine David as a young boy. I can imagine him standing up. And everyone, that other army coming, everyone's afraid and they're running and the army comes against them with a sword and a shield. But he stood up and said, you know what? I come against you with the Word of God and what God has for me. And I can imagine heaven saying, that little boy, check, David's all in. I can imagine that this morning. I can imagine Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego standing up and said, I will not bow. I will not conform. I could imagine at that moment when Jesus came down and stood with them in the fire, God said, you know what heaven said? Check, they're all in. They're all in. They all had one thing in common this morning, and that they were all in. They were all in. Can I get you guys to say that one more time? I'm all in. I am all in. This morning I could imagine Joshua as he was marching around those walls of Jericho for all those 7 days. And on that seventh day, he said, all right, boys, here we go. We're going to let out a shout. And whenever that shout happened, the walls fell. Check, he's all in. He's all in. I can imagine Elijah and Elisha when Elijah come to him and said, you know what? And Elisha's like, I want to follow you. And Elijah's like, you got to give everything up. And Elisha, he sacrificed the ox and he burnt the plow. Check, he's in. He's in. I can imagine that day when when God and His Son was sitting there. And he looks down and his son, and Jesus said, God, let me at him, because I'm tired of him messing with my people. I'm tired of him causing havoc on my people. I can imagine that moment when Jesus stepped on this earth. He shed His blood at the altar with every nail, with every whip, with every spit, and with every ridicule. Jesus yelled, I'm all in. I am all in. This morning, I'm bringing all this stuff to you, and I want you to know that all He asks is for you to be all in. That moment when Samson didn't deserve a second choice or second chance. He didn't deserve it. But he looked up to heaven and said, God, give me one more shot. Give me one more shot, and I will glorify your name. I will praise you. And when Samson began to sturdy himself up and he began to put his hands on those pillars, heaven jumped up and they cheered and said, that man's all in. That man's all in. This morning I'm asking you, has heaven ever done that for you? Have you ever had those moments in your life where your life is completely sold out and said, you know what? God, I'm all in. I don't care what I'm going through. I don't care what life has dealt me. I don't care I'm dissatisfied with my job. I don't make enough money. Maybe I don't have a job. Maybe my house is falling apart. My family's falling apart. My car barely makes it to church. But God, I'm all in. Guys, understand, Samson had no reason to be all in. The man had no eyes. He'd done been beaten. He had lost every bit of strength that he'd ever known. He had no reason to be all in, but he knew the God that he served, and he knew how mighty God was. Sometimes we need to remind ourselves how mighty and how awesome God is. Sometimes when we're in those situations, because that's all the devil wants to do. That's all he will. He just wants to put a little smoke screen in front of you so you can forget how amazing and how great God was at that moment He saved your life, or how He's guided you along that path that He has for your life. He just wants to put a little smoke screen so He can just make you look in another direction. Are you all in this morning? Are you all in this morning? You said this morning, Pastor, how do I get all in? How do I get all in? You got to make a choice. You just have to choose. You made a choice to be here this morning. You made a choice to wear the dress or the outfit that you've got on this morning. You got to make a choice. You've got to choose. I read those scriptures just a moment ago, and Peter absolutely is probably my favorite hero in the Bible. Peter was an amazing, I believe that Peter, and you've probably heard many people say this, and I believe this is true. I believe if Peter was here today, he would be a youth pastor. He was that crazy, zealous, messing up every now and again and having to get Jesus to kick him back in line type of guy. Had so much energy and so much passion. But as we read this story of Peter wasn't, at this moment where we read that he was out fishing and stuff, Peter wasn't a preaching man. He didn't preach. I don't think he'd ever heard the Word of God. He knew who Jesus was, but he'd never heard Him preach. Peter was just a normal guy. He was just a normal, average fisherman. That's all he was. There wasn't anything special about him. I'm sure this man looked like Popeye, though, with this big nets. That guy probably had some guns on him like out of this world. He was a big guy. Probably a smelly guy. He had done his 12-hour shift out on the sea. And when he come in, he's probably stinking and smelling and nasty and hot and tired and dirty. Just a normal guy. Just an average guy. There's nothing special about him. He was just like me and you. Just average people. But Jesus came his way. Jesus came his way. And I want you to paint this picture. When Jesus began to walk along the shore there, when he was walking in the sand, I believe that Jesus was probably a beach fan because he loved to walk in the sand. But as he was walking in the sand, can you imagine this? Paint this picture in your mind quickly. But as Jesus was walking around the crowds, the place that he was preaching at was about the size of 3 football fields. Could you imagine? And it was packed to the max with people wanting to hear Jesus, wanting to hear Him speak, wanting Him to give life. And every one of these people were rushing to the front row because they knew that whatever was in Jesus, if they could just touch Him, that would change their situation, that would come into them, that power, that authority, that healing would come into Him. When's the last time we rushed to the feet of Jesus? When's the last time that we said, you know what, God, no matter what I'm going through, I'm going to get at your feet. Because I know if I can just touch you, that what is in you will come in me and change my circumstance. It will change my situation. Could you imagine the crowds just hurling and rushing and bumping and moving like a concert, just moving out of the way, trying to get to the feet. And he's like, man, I can't do this. And so he looks over and sees the boat. He sees Peter's boat, and so he walks over there and he just hops up into the boat. Could you imagine Peter sitting there? He had just cleaned all of his nets. He had just got all of those, and I'm talking about these are huge nets. These aren't little nets like we're talking about. These things are massive, weighing hundreds of pounds. Big nets. Washing and cleaning them and getting all the shoes and the toilet seats because they ain't caught nothing. They've caught nothing. Getting all the fish scales and the dead fish out of there. He cleaned all that. And so he's finally taking a break and he's in his boat, just sitting there relaxing for a moment, tired, can't hardly hold his eyes open. He's still got to get home and tell his wife the great news that he caught nothing. And Jesus hops up into his boat and said, hey, pull me over here away from these people so I can speak to them, so I can preach to them. Could you imagine this guy? And Peter was just like, really? Of all these boats, you had to get in my boat? Really? He's like, of all this, why are you getting into my boat? I'm tired. I'm ready to go home. My wife is breakfast cooked. I'm ready to go. I've worked all night. And so Peter said, all right, fine. And so Peter pulls his boat out in front of these people on the water. And Jesus begins to teach these 3 football fields full of people, wanting to get close to Him, wanting to get near Him, wanting to hear everything He has to say. And as soon as Jesus gets through speaking, He looks at Peter and says, hey. And I'm sure He probably had to shove him and nudge him and wake him up, because he's probably done fell asleep back here. Because y'all know he was already tired. He didn't want to hear what Jesus had to say. He didn't want to hear. He was just tired. He's ready to go home. He was just doing this guy a favor. But He nudges him and said, hey, Simon, hey, why don't you take me back out there where you just got through fishing for 12 hours and you caught nothing but a dirty shoe and some fish scales. Let me let's go back out there. Get your nets and let's go back out there. Let's go back out there and we're going to catch some fish. Y'all see something odd in that picture? Are you serious? Peter, the fisherman, that is his profession. He went to Auburn University, got his degree, and he is a fisherman. But then you got Jesus over here that is a preacher man, a.k.a. carpenter. Over here, carpenter telling fishermen, hey, go back out here to this place that you just got through fishing that's not the honey hole. And let's go catch some fish. Could you imagine that scene? Him looking at him and saying, what? You're a carpenter. If it was something about cabinets, then I would take your word at it. But you're a carpenter. You have no clue about fishing. You see, Peter didn't know exactly. He knew who Jesus was, but he didn't know who Jesus was. And so he looked and he said, are you serious that you, of all places, let us go over here? But Jesus said, no. I want to take you back to that place that you failed, and I want to take you back out there, and we're going to catch some fish. I'm going to catch some fish. And I could imagine Peter's just sarcastic, like, fine, whatever. And he yells out at his buddies, hey, grab the little net. Grab that little net over there and let's just, I've done cleaned all the rest of them. He's tired, he's hot, he don't want to clean them again. So he got the smallest 5x10 net he could find. Do you notice I said net? Not nets, but net. When's the last time that when Jesus spoke something into your life and it was almost like in an amazement of distrust, just like, or just cannot believe, are you serious? You're telling me that? When's the last, we just give Him half of what we've got? We just give Him half because we just truly don't believe that you just said that to me? Really? The same situation that the carpenter's telling the fishermen to go right back out here and let's fish and we're going to catch more than you'll ever need. He said, John, grab that one net and bring it to me and we'll put it in the boat and I'm going to just satisfy this guy. I'm sure that there was sarcasm in his voice. Fine, Jesus, let's go right back out here. I'm just going to humor you for a minute and I'm going to show you that there's no fish over here. How many of you know that fish, they travel in schools, they all in packs? The fish of the ocean and of the sea, they travel and they're in about 10% of the water, of the body. There's of the 100% of water, about 10% of a body of water is where the fish is at. They're all in packs. And so Peter knows they ain't in that spot. And so he's like, all right, fine. We'll go back out there. Fine. I got my net. We'll go back out there. But at the moment that whenever he went out there and he began to let it, Jesus said, all right, go ahead and let your net down. And y'all know what, y'all can finish the story from there. At that moment, whenever he let those nets down, fish didn't just come into that, they began to leap into that net. They began to leap into the net. And he began to drag in fish. He began to dump them in the boat. And he began to throw them back out there. And he began to drag in more. And he's like, James, John, come on, I need you. I'm sinking. Bring your nets. Do you notice that Peter wanted to bring a net, but after he saw what Jesus was doing, he's like, bring them all. We can't hold them all. Bring them all. And so they brought them all in. Both of these boats were almost to the point of sinking. They were almost to the point of sinking. They had so much fish. They couldn't believe it. They're almost in just disbelief. And finally it hit Peter, and he fell to his knees and says, "You are God! Wow! You are God! You are God! Depart from me because I am unworthy." When's the last time that we were in that moment of disbelief, but then God showed up and showed you who was God and who was King of Kings and the Lord of Lords? When's the last time that we didn't really trust Him in that thing that He said to step into, in that moment? When we said, God said, you know what, you need to make one step that way and trust me. And when's the last time that you said, all right, God, I'm going to take a step, but I'm going to leave my other foot back here? That's what Peter was doing. Peter said, grab the net. Grab that one single net, and I will humor this guy and let me get home because I'm hungry. See, I want you to understand that Peter gave half of what he had. But I want you to understand that when Jesus died on the cross, all Jesus knows how to do is give you all of Himself. And this morning, that's all He's asking you to do is give you all of Himself, all yourself to Him. That's all He's asking you to do this morning. He's not asking you to pick up a net. He's asking you to get all your nets up and follow Him. Trust Him in those places that you failed. This morning, there's places in our life that we have completely failed. In our jobs, in our homes, with our families, with ourselves, with God, whatever it may be, there's places that we have failed, and we would dare not go back there. Because I can promise you, if you can look at Peter's agenda for the next day, it wasn't going back to that same place. He was going to try somewhere else. He was going to go to a whole nother spot because he knew that there wasn't anything in there. He knew that there was no fish in that exact spot. But the Word says not lean on to our own understanding, but lean upon Him. Is that what it says? And so Peter learned the hard way. Peter learned that, you know what, if you would have I could just imagine if he would have decided to get all the nets and not just that one small puny one in the corner. If he'd have got every one of them, I could have imagined the fish in the catch that he would have gotten. This morning I want to challenge you. There's places in your life that you have failed. There's places that you would dare not walk back into. There's places that you say, you know what, when that speaks up, when it may be a job, or it may be a situation, or it may be a calling on your life, and you just like, nope. Let time out. We're going to pull a Peter for a minute and say, are you sure? Seriously? Those times in our life when Jesus says, you know what, the difference was in that moment is that when Peter went out to catch the fish the first time, it was just Peter. It was just Peter and his buddies. But the second time he went back out to that place that he had failed, he had decided to take Jesus with him. When's the last time that whenever you looked at those places that seem impossible, you know what? We need to remember to bring our buddy along. His name is Jesus. We don't need to walk in those places by ourselves, in those situations by ourselves. We need to bring the man with us. We need to bring Jesus with us this morning. A lot of times in our life, in those situations, we try to face them alone. We try to face them by ourselves and we forget completely to bring Jesus. I can promise you when we get in our car, we ain't going to forget to bring the keys, are we? We ain't going to forget to bring the keys. Half of us in here, when we leave somewhere, we ain't going to forget to bring our phone. When we walk out the door, man, we ain't going to forget to bring our wallets. When we go shopping, we're not going to forget to bring those debit cards and that cash and check or whatever you pay for. We need to understand when we have those situations in our life that seem impossible, that seem like there's no way to man that it's going to happen. We need to understand that we need to bring Jesus along in our situation. We need to understand to be all in with Him. And at that moment when Jesus brought all of those fish, and when Peter began to catch all that fish, and when Peter fell to his knees and said, you know what, you are God. You are God. You are God. Oh my goodness. I know what those people were looking for. I know what they were listening for. You are God. And at that moment when he hit his knees And at that moment when he fell to his knees and said, God, I'm so unworthy. God, I'm so unworthy. Jesus looked down at him and said, you know what, Peter? Don't be afraid. Don't fear. But from now on, this is the last catch of fish you're going to ever catch. But from now on, you're going to be a fisher of men. You're going to be a fisher of men. And my favorite part of that whole 11 verses was that when they got back to the shore, he told everybody goodbye. He gave his daddy back the business. Along not just with Peter, but James and John as well. So you know what? I'm giving everything to this guy. I am following this guy. And this morning you may be sitting in this place and it may be that, you know what, I am following him, but really are you? Are you really following him? Are you just kind of listening to what he has to say every now and again when it's convenient? But when the things seem impossible, you just cut him off because you know it's not possible? This morning I'm asking you, are you willing to do what it takes to be all in?